Today we're going to be talking about multi-channel expansion, how that relates to e-commerce, what sales channels and stores, anything that you should be looking out for in the market, and kind of what all of this means for you and your business and how you can kind of get started and start preparing. I know e-commerce growth through multi-channel expansion is a bit of a mouthful, but we'll dive right into it. And just to do some introductions, my name is John May. Those of you who have been to any WebGility webinars recently should know me by now. I am the face of WebGility, customer engagement. I've been with WebGility for just about 3 years now. Been in e-commerce maybe a little bit longer than that. Since I was 18, I have been kind of in and out of the e-commerce space. I worked at a web hosting company for a few years and developed websites on the side for people. So kind of known about e-commerce for a long time, but now I am knee deep in the e-commerce space. And with me today is Seth David. I'll let him introduce himself.
And yeah, my name is Seth David. Thank you, John, for having me on the webinar. I am with Nerd Enterprises. I started this company in 2003, kind of incorporated it in 2007, and I'm here still all these years later. And along the way, e-commerce became a specialty of mine. I was sort of forced into it by a client, and but I love it. I love getting involved with these kinds of niches for accountants and bookkeepers to serve because it represents something that is complicated, which means a lot of people aren't willing to learn how to do it properly, which means, basic economics, supply and demand. It's an opportunity for accountants and bookkeepers like me who want to serve these kinds of businesses.
Love it. Yeah, and we've done a lot of work together, Seth. I know you and I hosted a webinar just about a month ago, maybe not even that. And it also went really well. We love having you and love to dive into these topics. So to go over the agenda today, this is just a kind of a rough outline of the conversation. Again, if you've been to any of our recent webinars, the way that these generally go is we have a general outline for the topics and kind of the broad conversation. And then in between the slides, we'll provide more color, have a bit more of a conversation. We do heavily encourage that you guys engage, not necessarily have to wait for the Q&A at the very end to ask your questions. If it doesn't have anything to do with the slide that we're on, it might take us a bit to get to that part of the conversation. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions that you have either in the question and answer tool in Zoom or in the chat. Obviously, the question and answer format's a little easier for us to manage. Um, but yeah, so to start off, we're going to talk about what multi-channel is, what that word even means, and how that might differ from another term that you might have heard, which is omni-channel. And then we'll move into preparing for expansion, kind of dipping your toes into the omni-channel world, or if you are already multi-channel and have multiple sales channels, where to look next and maybe what should be on the horizon for you. And then we'll kind of end it with making sure that you are set up for success, that you're planning properly, and that you can execute um, successfully and have an execution that is repeatable for the future on any other sales channels you decide to expand onto. All right, so let's start with the basics. Like I said, I always like to start with the minutia of the conversation and kind of just define what everything means. So, what does multi-channel mean? It's pretty simple. It's just the idea of having more than one sales channel or more than one place that you're selling or approaching your audience. So an example of this would be having an Amazon store for your dropship products and then maybe a Shopify store for your in-house catalog. To take it even further, you could have maybe an eBay store for stuff that's damaged goods or returns that you're maybe auctioning off at a lower price. Being multi-channel means that you are not tied to one specific marketplace or one specific website. And then it also has the benefit of it increases your reach beyond maybe what that single channel might offer. So, an example of this is using Walmart or Amazon as a storefront or as your marketplace gives you access to their exposure directly. So you're not relying on all of your own marketing necessarily. Your products exist in a marketplace where people can find them without having to know who you are, essentially. And yeah, I mean, so depending on the channel that you end up expanding to or the channel that you end up using, you are boosting your exposure, giving yourself a little bit more reach beyond what maybe a custom site or something that you built yourself might do. And the next thing here would be, how is that different from omnichannel? I want to touch on this just a little bit, not too much, but this is kind of a prelude to our next webinar, which is on the 15th in a couple weeks here. And we're kind of taking the conversation a little bit further. So while multi-channel focuses on the channels that you sell on, omni-channel is the idea or more of a philosophy that extends into making sure that you're connecting all of your technology, not just your sales channels, not just your accounting, not just your shipping, but everything should communicate with each other to streamline your data and to streamline your workflows and make sure that you're spending less time on manual processes, just to kind of tighten everything up around the business in general. So a good example of this would be a business using like an ERP system, which would be like NetSuite to handle all their accounting, and then they integrate with a CRM to handle any marketing or retention, and a chat bot that handles their returns. So the idea is that you're utilizing as much technology as possible to streamline everything. So that's the next step, I would say, above multi-channel. There's a lot more to being omni-channel. Multi-channel is just, again, the idea that you have more than one sales channel. All right. And it's important to know that it's a great idea to expand to other channels, but you need to understand what it means to expand to different channels and what the nuances of each of those channels might be. Um, so to understand what these nuances are, you need to understand your audience. When you start a business, it's important to know what your audience even is and define your audience. And I'm sure all of you have probably done that. But once you know who your audience is, or the type of people that are looking to buy your product, you should then know where to find them. So knowing where your customers are is, I think, one of the more quintessential aspects of expanding your reach onto a new channel. So if you don't know where your prospective customers might shop, you're going to have a hard time selling to them. If you sell something niche, it is in the same vein important to understand where that niche thrives in. But how do you find your audience? I have a link at the end of this webinar that I'm going to send out with the full slide deck that goes over how to find your audience, because there's a lot to that conversation. We could have a whole webinar on that. But the shorthand here is utilizing things like Google Analytics, website analytics, if you have something that tracks your website data, and then using social media to kind of scan what's popular or what is resonating with your audience in your specific niche. And you have anything you want to add here, Seth? I know I've been doing a lot of
Yeah,
talking.
actually, it's funny. One thing I just want to add to what everything you just said is, and I did an example of this just recently. You know, I have a program called 97 and Up where I have a group of accountants and bookkeepers, and we actually used e-commerce as the example, and we used it was actually Notion AI, which runs off of the Chat GPT framework, to have it develop a detailed sort of customer avatar in terms of what we might be looking for in our audience for an e-commerce company. And then we had it, by the time I was done, within the space of 1 hour, I had an incredibly detailed uh, marketing plan, basically, that identified who the exact customer was that we were looking for, how to reach them, which social networks to reach them on. And even I started having it give us outlines and examples of content we could produce for the purpose of attracting that exact audience. And to put it there in the places that were suggested. So AI is definitely a tool that should not be ignored and definitely utilized for this exact purpose.
Yeah, it's also something we'll mention here a little bit later too. Just utilizing the technology that is free to you, or that can help you kind of understand things to an easier depth, and kind of lower that cognitive burden of having to do so much research on things like your audience or the stores that you need to go to. So it looks like Krishna has the question: what is the name of the AI companion tool?
So I mentioned it's Notion AI. So Notion is a tool that I use to kind of track and manage all of my, it's like a second brain. I manage everything from to-dos for my business to personal stuff. So I have it all organized in there, and they have a built-in AI, which is called Notion AI, that goes with that product. But you could do the exact same thing I did there, just using Chat GPT or one of the other, LLMs or large language model chatbots. So it uses Chat GPT, which is OpenAI's LLM. Yes.
Yeah, very, very useful. I mean, day to day, you can find a million uses for OpenAI and
Mhm.
the large language models. I'm going to change my camera battery. It has a habit of dying right at the beginning of the webinar.
All right. So while we're waiting for John to do that, if there's any other questions, by all means. But yeah, any of these large language models, of course, there is what's the other Microsoft one is Copilot, right? They keep renaming these, so the names might change, but you can use Copilot if you happen to use the Edge browser. It's built right in to that. Any of these, you can just start a transcript with the LLM and start and just prompt it. And you prompt it by talking to it the way you would talk to a human being. So imagine you've just hired a marketing expert and you want to come up with a marketing plan to reach your core audience. In some cases for e-commerce, the product itself is going to define who the audience is. In other words, it's very linear as far as here's a product and these are the exact people who use that product. In other cases, it might be more broad. I had a client years ago who started out selling lock boxes for realtors, and um, and he started selling them on Amazon and he was doing very well. So in his case, his audience was very clear and specific and obvious. It was real estate brokers and agents who, needed lock boxes to put on their, not lock boxes, but those devices you put on the door where if you have somebody who wants to check out the listing, they can go and enter the code and look around themselves. So, and then he expanded little by little into products that went way beyond what was just applicable to real estate. So somebody in the Q&A asked the best way to figure out which channels your customers are in. Again, right back to exactly what I'm talking about right here, right now. Use the AI tools that are out there and explain to it the context of what your product is and who you need to serve. Again, you can go through a series of iterations with it, having it help you define who that is. And then once you have that defined in that chat transcript, then you can ask it because it now has all the context it needs, which are the best channels to find those people in. And a lot of this is going to depend on, again, the kind of products you sell. A good example that I think of is a store, a platform like Etsy, where typically it's not necessarily universally true, but typically the people who are selling on Etsy are creatives, artistic people, people who make crafts and things of that nature. So a lot of the answer to that question as far as how to figure out the channels your customers are in are of course understanding your market and who they are, who's going to buy your products, and based on that, who's going to sell on that kind of platform.
Yeah, yeah, and just to add on to that, even beyond the AI stuff, I mean, you can use Google Analytics or your website analytics to see your current progress on your current store and understand the demographics that are currently purchasing your products if you have an existing store and have some measure of success. And then just utilizing like your eyeballs too. If you're if you're on social media at all and you see a trend or a specific niche that you might be interested in, it's interesting to see the types of people that are kind of in that space and understand the tools that they use or the places that they go to find those products.
Yeah.
Kind of a good exercise that I've used in the past is putting yourself in your customer's shoes. Like think of yourself as your own customer and try to find the products that you sell or the products that you want to sell. And that takes you really quickly to the places that you need to be or to to see your competitors and what they're doing and where they exist.
Yeah.
That's a good question. And that leads us to the next slide here, which is what are your options? This is the big one, right? Like what stores exist out there for me to expand onto? And obviously there are a number of, and all the stuff that you see on the screen is definitely stuff that you've most likely heard of. But to get to, I guess, the more detailed part of the question, which is why should I be invested in any specific store or why is one store more worth it for me to expand onto? I think it's important to understand the difference between the types of stores. So, what is a marketplace versus a storefront versus social media versus custom? So, marketplaces, they are a place that you list your products. You have a storefront on the marketplace that, again, utilizes the main corporation's exposure. So Amazon, Walmart, Etsy are all really good examples of this. Same with Target, and eBay falls into this category as well with a little bit of a caveat, but you are listing your products using their servers, their website, all of their ad spaces, and taking advantage of their exposure. Storefronts, on the other hand, are generally either made in tandem with a custom store or made as like a custom storefront itself, where you create a shop and list everything yourself, and it's a lot more bespoke, can be branded to you. There's usually templates. And then social media is all the rage right now. I'm sure everybody's heard of TikTok Shop and the, I guess, implications of TikTok Shop existing at this point in time. But yeah, social media is a place where you can engage with social content and sell your products directly in the social media apps. Where custom stores are a lot more work. There's a lot of them. They tend to be more services rather than like where Shopify, you can just sign up for a Shopify store. Custom store would generally imply that you're having a developer build out your store for you. It's all custom, all bespoke. Not exactly what we're going to talk about today. All right. And with those stores, understanding the demographic or the niches that exist in all of these stores. Because there are a lot of different stores out there and they all service different people, right? So a good example of like a demographic niche would be TikTok or Facebook. TikTok is very, very popular with the younger generations, as I'm sure we all know. Same with Facebook. Facebook used to tend to be a lot more of the younger generations, but it has skewed a lot more to the older generations at this point. So understanding what age group your customers might fit into, understanding what industry your products fit into, understanding where in the world your products might thrive more in. Things like Alibaba are more of like a global marketplace where you can do a lot more, I guess, wholesale fulfillment, drop shipping, stuff like that. Same with Amazon, but there's the point is that there's just a lot of different, I guess, demographics to all of these stores, and understanding where you should exist or where you fit in with this framework is super important. And just like with the kind of where to find your audience conversation, I've included a link at the end of the webinar. I built a whole spreadsheet out with 50 of the top or most popular sales channels, where to find them, where to sign up for them, what demographic they serve, if it's a marketplace or social media, or if it's a storefront. So that is going to be sent out to everybody so you can kind of look at all the options that, again, are kind of the most popular, and kind of poke around and see which ones might fit for you. Anything you want to expand upon here? I know I mentioned TikTok Shop. That is a huge question here. I think we could spend a little time on that. So obviously the big macroeconomical and political conversation with TikTok right now is it even going to exist within the next year? So that gives a lot of people pause when kind of trying to determine if they want to, start a TikTok shop. And I think personally, in my opinion, I think it's a low effort venture to start a TikTok shop. You're not necessarily having to pour a lot of money into starting a TikTok shop. It's not like a custom store where you have to put a ton of development work into it or really do a lot of A/B testing. If you have the products and you know that it can thrive on TikTok shop, I say go for it. I think it's a good idea. Just know that there is the risk of it not being accessible to the US market at some point in the future. Whether or not that will actually happen is still very much up for debate, obviously. But yeah, important to know that there's a lot that goes into understanding which store you should move on to. Um, I know, Seth, you deal obviously a lot with accounting and understanding what is required from different sales channels from the accounting perspective. For TikTok Shop specifically, do you feel like that is something to be handled with care?
I mean, like you said, the setting up the shop itself isn't going to take a lot of work, but I think to support that shop, it's going to require that you be very consistent about producing content on TikTok that will drive people to that shop, right? So that's where the work's going to come in. is creating the content and then giving people the call to action of, hey, by the way, if you like this product, click here. I think certainly I agree with you that it's worth doing, especially if you feel that your audience, your potential customers are people who are on TikTok, such as, like you said, if your product appeals to the very younger generations, Gen Z, millennials, and so on, not as even as much millennials. It's really like the Gen Z social network. But I definitely would not put all my eggs in that basket. In fact, can you back up one slide real
Yeah.
quick? I just want to do a quick kind of analysis here. So what I first of all, because the question's probably already looming in the back of people's minds, at least as to, how many of these do I need? So what I want to speak to that real quickly and say, at the very least, I think you need your own storefront. So you're either going to do a Shopify or a WooCommerce. That's basically your own website that you use to sell your own products. And then on top of that, you'll choose maybe another marketplace and a social media or two, right? So now let's go back forward to the slide we were just on. Um, because now, with that in mind, sure, dive in, do TikTok. The bill has passed. That they have, I forget what the time limit is, but from what I'm reading, people are saying it's going to be a good year probably before anything happens realistically, because there's going to be a big legal battle that's going to go back and forth. But the legislation has passed, giving them a deadline by which they have to sell, and they've already said they're not going to sell. And there's a lot of influencers on the platform who are also pushing back, saying, "Hey, you're going to take away my ability to make a living." So like you said, John, there's no telling for sure what could happen. Um, but bottom line, don't put all your eggs in that basket, but it's going to be around for a minute. It's worth it. Set it up. If you think it's a good channel to reach the audience that you're trying to reach, go for it, do it. But obviously, you should also have your own storefront and probably at least one other marketplace like Amazon or something,
Yeah.
so that like we talked about in the very beginning, so that you're achieving the omni-channel, the multi-channel goal of having multiple, I like to call these distribution channels, right? I read an article a couple of years back actually that compared this concept of these distribution channels in e-commerce to what if you're only e-commerce and, in other words, don't have any kind of a brick and mortar avenue for selling your products. They gave the example of, like, take Starbucks, right? If Starbucks wants to test out a new product, they can simply put it on their shelves in their stores and see how it does, right? If you don't have that luxury, then you have to think of these other marketplaces as because a Starbucks store is a distribution channel. It's a means through
Mhm.
which they can distribute products. You have to think of your e-commerce stores in marketplaces as the sort of digital version of a distribution channel. And that's where you can try out different products. And for that matter, since we're talking about being on the web, you can try out different descriptions. Really, you should have somebody working with you if you yourself are not an SEO expert, who is an SEO expert who can really play with the different descriptions. So you can test things out in each of these different stores or marketplaces to A, test out newer versions of your products, and B, test out different descriptions or categories to put those products in to see maybe it'll do well in a place you don't expect or vice versa. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. I mean, beyond just diversifying the types of stores that you're in, I think yeah, it's super important to express that you should diversify your approach to those stores as well. Like with all of these stores having different demographics that they serve or different ways that you interact with your audience, having those different descriptions or different images of your products, just like a different vibe, I guess, even to your overall brand, can have really good results depending on the store that you're doing it on. So
yeah.
yeah, super big. And I like that you mentioned the brick and mortar idea because that is a perfect segue into the next topic.
I
Which
wasn't planned.
which is think of POS as a channel. So just like he just said, it is when we talk about Starbucks, it's a distribution network to have that physical location. It's a way for them to put their products in front of people, and that is how you should look at a brick and mortar location yourself. I'm sure some of you do have brick and mortar locations already, but if you don't and are kind of thinking of opening one at any point or maybe shied away from it, it is always something that you should consider an option. It's obviously on the more expensive end of sales channels if we're talking about kind of apples to apples here. But uh, obviously, with having a physical location, there is a signal boost that comes there, a level of brand awareness that is kind of pushed out to the world, and it signals a little bit more trust as well, knowing that you have like a physical location that people can go to. Um, And on the topic of POS, there are a lot of POS options, just like there are sales channels. You can have, I mean, you can use QuickBooks Point of Sale, which has been sunset support-wise, but it is something that people still do use, one of the wider used POS systems. Shopify POS is a huge one as well. Lightspeed is a very large up and coming POS system. We actually at WebGility just announced that we're continuing to integrate with Lightspeed. We rolled out an integration with Lightspeed POS for their X series on our online application, and we're working on kind of getting that up for our desktop application. And then Toast primarily services the restaurant bar industry, and Square, just like all the others, kind of services every niche that you could have in POS. They're all very good options. While Toast is generally more focused on the food and beverage, the others are, again, pretty general application. Yes, good call out, Seth. POS, point of sale.
Yeah,
Very
just
good
in
distinction
case. I
to
assume
make.
everybody here is an expert, but I know sometimes I hear acronyms and I'm embarrassed to ask because I feel like I'm going to look dumb. So just in case, I want to make sure everybody
There's a lot of
understands.
jargon, P&L and
Yep. And POS
POS
has
and
other meanings in other contexts, so that, you know.
yeah, a
Um,
very good call out.
One thing I do want to talk about, especially because I'm the accountant in the room,
Hmm.
is it's really important when you're considering one of these to, if you're researching it, to, as part of your research, include something about making sure that the POS is going to integrate well with your accounting software. You know, as John mentioned, some of these will integrate with WebGility, which I can attest definitely integrates well with QuickBooks Online. Obviously, QuickBooks Point of Sale is designed to work with QuickBooks. It's by the same company. But that's definitely something you want to look into. So, like, if you're looking at something like Toast and you're talking to the company, ask them questions about the integration. See if you can get some kind of a preview, or if I'm talking to the business owner, you know, get your accountant involved. Nothing frustrates your accountant or bookkeeper more, by the way, than you coming to them after you've made this decision and saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to start using Toast," and the accountant's like, "Wait, I haven't even had a chance to make sure this is going to work well in the accounting." So, important stuff there to keep in mind.
Yeah, and you'll need to handle a brick and mortar in a separate way than you would an Amazon store, right? Like
Yep.
having the physical inventory on hand is something that is a little different than if you're using Amazon FBA and you have a distribution network and utilize their warehouses. So, all that's to say that there is some planning that needs to go into starting a new sales channel, which is our next topic here. So,
Yep.
once you've decided which stores you're interested in and where your audience is at and who your audience even is, then you can start on the execution process of kind of expanding and growing your sales channels. Um, so I like this little roadmap our designer made. It's really cool. Just want to call that out. Once you decide on a store, you can put those plans into action. But one caveat here is that you shouldn't ever feel like you need to do all of these things at once. Because there is a lot to do, right? Especially if it's a new venture and maybe you are putting new products out on the market and you're starting a Shopify store. You've got pictures to take of your inventory. You have to write a whole catalog out with all the prices and descriptions, and there's no shortage of work to be done in that realm. So try to do it as methodically as you can. Especially if you have it in your mind that you want to expand to three different channels. Start with one, start small. You don't have to move all of your products at once if you're trying to look to like migrate an entire store's catalog onto another sales channel. Start with the stuff that you know is going to sell well or the stuff that's popular on your current store, and kind of start in phases and build everything out. Because one, with the uncertainty of the e-commerce market and how trends come and go, it's important, like Seth said, not to put all of your eggs in one basket. Uh, so one thing that you can do here to set yourself up for success is create a process for scaling. So this can mean a lot of different things. I think some of the more important things are create a SKU numbering system that makes sense, that doesn't have to be, let's say you hire a couple new people and you have to train them on your SKU process and catalog. And if it doesn't make sense to them, you should probably redo it. You should probably make something that is straightforward, very easily numbered, maybe categoric in terms of like separating things out between products and making sure that they all are kind of grouped together. And then templatize that as much as possible. So anything that you can do to make sure that it is repeatable and able to be scaled out is going to set you up for success going forward. And this applies to just centralizing your assets, your data, any documents that you have. Uh, no shortage of things that you could be doing here to make sure that as you grow, you're not having to kind of reinvent the wheel every single time you go to a new store. So there's things that you can do to make sure that when you do go into a new store, you can just copy things over, and it's as simple as that. Maybe not super simple, but a little bit of work goes a long way here. But one thing to know, and kind of on the topic of TikTok that we just talked about, is you got to know when to pivot too. And this goes both ways. You have to know when to pivot away from something and when to pivot to something. So this is where that having a diversified portfolio is super important. If, let's say, you do have a TikTok shop right now, and it goes away within the next year. There's no certainty there right now, but let's say that it does end up um, I guess they get pushed out of the US and you have to go somewhere else. The obvious choice then would be maybe to go to Instagram, because Instagram has a very similar shopping network, and a very similar social media platform in general. So know that there is a backup there. Understand when you're on a sales channel what your backups might be. And if you already have multiple sales channels, you might not be as deterred um, by news like this if you have sales channels that are already set up, uh, as sort of, again, that diversification. Um, Another thing that you could do is understand your reporting. So this should be something that everybody does, but look at your seasonality, your trends, things that are going well for your business at certain times of the year, and understand that you can make adjustments and make sure that you can keep kind of ahead of these trends or ahead of the seasonality. Most sales channels will have reporting built into them. There are obviously tools that you can use to centralize the reporting across all of your sales channels. But try to utilize those built-in tools at first and understand what's performing well, what's not performing well, so that you can get ahead of any issues that might crop up in the business before they become a real problem. And then I know it sounds cheesy, sounds really obvious, but take advantage of any of those viral things that are happening in the market. It's important to, like we said, understand your audience. But if you're on TikTok and you see that there's a specific um, post format, music format, products that are cropping up that seem to be selling really well or really popular, they're obviously popular for a reason. I wouldn't maybe put all of your stock in these popular trendy products because they seem to come and go pretty quickly. But there is something to be said for keeping a pulse or keeping your finger on the pulse of that sort of activity and kind of jumping in when you're able to.
Yeah, and I would just add, along those lines, look at, even if it's not a competing or similar product to what you sell, just look at what's working for people and observe how they're marketing that product. A lot of times, something that can really have an atomic effect in your own marketing is looking at what's working in a different industry or a different kind of product, let's just call it, and then applying the same methods for promoting your own products. And boom, because nobody else is doing it or not doing it yet, that's where it can have the atomic effect, because something that stands out as being different than what people are used to seeing for your particular product is, like I said, that can be atomic. So look for opportunities like that, that can help you stand out while just applying the format of how somebody's selling products that's working really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess one thing to kind of wrap up this whole like planning execution phase of everything is utilizing, kind of as we talked about, utilizing the technology that you have access to get the most out of your current sales channels and set yourself up for that growth onto other sales channels. So one thing that I wanted to call out is, and Seth had already mentioned it, is Notion. You can use Notion to build out a really solid framework for yourself, from an organization perspective, and make sure that all of your notes, your documents, your processes are in one place, so that you can make solid decisions for yourself and for your business going forward. I know Seth has a lot of courses both in the e-commerce and accounting world, but he recently released a course on Notion for work management and is currently working on sort of revamping and upgrading that course as well. If you want to talk about that real quick. So
Sure. Yeah. In fact, just, piggybacking off of what you were just talking about, Notion is the perfect tool to imagine this because we talked about setting up your stores, your channels. A Notion is the kind of tool that can be used to build your kind of back end database, for example, of every product you sell with those pictures of the products, everything stored in a database where you can add in fields basically into that database to basically designate here's the sales channel or marketplace or marketplaces where this product is being sold, and then you can branch that off into here's the copy we're going to use for that product listing separate for each of those. Like you can really build it out and be very detailed. The course I just launched is called Bulletproof Notion 2.0, and so I've evolved it to where I'm instead of calling it a work management system, which is what I originally called it because it's where I manage all of my work. I'm now sort of elevating it to something that I'm thinking of as even broader, and I'm calling it a complete operating system because it literally puts everything I need to manage everything in my business right at my fingertips, including, as a granular example, my bookmarks. Like I don't use my browser bookmarks anymore because when I'm working on something with Notion, I have the ability using databases to push my bookmarks into a project so that they're all the bookmarks I need while I'm working on a particular project are just right there. So I can use a quick search, call it up, and click, click, boom. I've got my browser tabs open to the places I need to be, and I can get to work and stay focused. That's essentially what it's all about with Notion.
yeah, super, super useful stuff. And even if it's not Notion that you're using, having some sort of project management system for your business is super important. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged project management system like Asana or like Jira or anything like that, but at least having something that gives you an idea of where your work is at any given time. It gives you the ability to pull up any sort of documents that you need on the fly, and kind of get everything organized. I think is really important. Organization is insanely important to growing your business. And I see Krishna said a quick demo next session would help. I think that is a great idea. Seth and I have discussed having a session sort of about that specifically, but yeah, he also has a YouTube channel, and we can send those links out. I actually had planned to include some documentation that links out to his Notion course as well.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and then beyond work management and project management, uh, what WebGility does is also important. Not necessarily even that it needs to just be WebGility, but automating your accounting for your e-commerce is super, super important. So it goes back to that centralization of data. If you have multiple stores, you don't want to have to go and manage those orders and create sales receipts and sales tax records and everything yourself. You can have a system that pulls all that data in there for you from all of your sales channels and puts them directly into something like QuickBooks for you. So things like that definitely take the manual work out of running an e-commerce business. And then, as we discussed, utilizing AI in ways like creating product descriptions, ideating on video content if you're doing that social media approach. Really, anything that you can use it for to get ahead, understand where your audience is at, understand which sales channels are important to you. It for no money, at least for ChatGPT, you can get a lot of value. Looks like we have a question. We operate a Shopify store and use WebGility to sync our sales to our accounting ERP system. We would like to capture serial numbers on the front end, but are having trouble as there doesn't seem to be a field available in the native version of Shopify. Do you guys have experience helping integrate serial numbers? And if so, what was the solution to the Shopify storefront? In my experience, because I worked in implementation with WebGility, it tended to be a custom field, but I can, being as that you're anonymous, if you want to shoot me an email at john.may@webgility.com, I can get with my team and we can sort that out for you. In my experience, though, and this may have changed just because I don't work in the product day to day now, it was a custom field that we used for serial numbers. Because yeah, I do remember that serial numbers not something that's available in Shopify. Um, yeah, here you go. john.may@webgility.com. Perfect. Yeah, any questions anybody has about the product, feel free to email me there as well. I can get you to the right team. That is one of the reasons I am here. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can. But one thing I did want to go over, because I know I mentioned this sheet of stores that I put together, listed by demographic. I did want to go over that because part of this webinar was to give you guys an idea of what stores you should be looking at and where to kind of focus your efforts. Um, so let's look at that real quick. Again, this is included at the end of the presentation. It's going to get sent out, so this will be linked for everybody. But in the sheet, I have I would say top 50. There's definitely some options that aren't included here. And then I've opted to include a lot that are directly integrated with WebGility, just to kind of, I mean, we are WebGility, so it's important that we get you guys options that integrate with us. But this sheet will show you some of the top options as well as the type of channel that it is, if it's a storefront, marketplace, social media, POS, the demographic that it serves primarily, and then a link directly to sign up and get more information on becoming a vendor for using that sales channel. So one specifically that I wanted to call out, obviously Shopify is the biggest name in e-commerce right now from a individual storefront perspective. I think having a Shopify store, either Shopify or Wix maybe, as a baseline is really good because you have a pretty bespoke custom website that you make yourself, that you have complete control over from an SEO standpoint, and you're not relying on the exposure of Amazon or the marketplace itself. Like Seth said, I think it's important to have that baseline kind of basic store approach before you move on to something else. So Shopify and Wix, I think, are two of the biggest options. If you have a WordPress site or a custom built WordPress site, WooCommerce is going to be your option there in terms of an e-commerce store. And then for marketplaces, Amazon is always going to be the behemoth at this point in time. Obviously, that's like it's the biggest for a reason. But Walmart has been making huge inroads over the past couple of years in getting people um, kind of to compete with the Walmart model or to compete with the Amazon model, sorry. So Walmart's one that I would look out for. It was kind of like on our radar for the past couple of years as being a really good option, and I think it still continues to be that. As far as light or POS goes, Lightspeed is a really, really good option. Like I said, we just started integrating with them, but they just purchased Vend, which is now Lightspeed X series, so they're growing. It seems to be that they're going to continue to grow going forward. And then for some of the more like specific niches, things like House for interior decorators, like Wayfair, Lowe's, Home Depot, all those you can sell on. You just have to go through a vendor process. Depop, Poshmark, ThreadUp, if you sell clothes, really good options for those. And then we already mentioned TikTok Shop, but Instagram Shop is essentially the same model, with a lot of the same trends and virality and kind of efforts that you can put behind it. So, like I said, this sheet is going to be sent out, so you'll have full access to it. I have another question from Mike Bresner. If I already have WebGility putting Shopify and QuickBooks together, how hard is it to add another channel? Not hard at all, actually. With WebGility subscriptions, you get access to two channels by default. So you can add another channel if you already have one. You just go into your connections and then click the little plus sign next to sales channel, and it'll give you the list of integrations that we have. From there, it's just as easy as logging in. If you have issues or trouble getting started with your connection, just reach out to us. We can have one of our onboarding people give you kind of a refresher course and walk you through setting up that second sales channel. But generally, not hard at all. Some of them may require a little bit more work, like WooCommerce as an example. If you're a WordPress site, you have to use a widget, and there's like a whole API connection that needs to happen. Still not super complicated, but it's not as easy as just like putting your username and password in. So
I
again,
had a
if
client who was using WooCommerce with WebGility, and by the way, we moved her to Shopify
Mhm.
specifically because she got on Shark Tank, and we knew that her WordPress site was not going to be able to handle the traffic that Shark Tank was going to drive. And then, funny little cool side note, Shopify, among many really cool features, has a feature where you can look at a live map of where in the world people are as they're on your site purchasing, and you can see how many are like in checkout and whatever. And so we were watching that while her Shark Tank episode was airing, and it was really cool to see the maps just like light up with people. So Anyway,
Yeah, I mean that's another really good call out is and this is something that I wanted to talk about in our next webinar, not to keep plugging that, but on the 15th, um your hosting service is something that you should always be aware of too. If you're using a custom shop like WooCommerce or something that isn't hosted directly on like Shopify servers. If you're hosting your own site, make sure that your hosting provider can accommodate server allocation for you if you do have any sort of like spike in virality. If you're utilizing those viral trends and kind of working on um kind of seasonality and getting spikes in interest, make sure that your hosting provider can accommodate that because yeah, nothing hurts worse than striking lightning with some sort of viral sensation and then
and
not
then your
being able
site
to
crashes.
yeah,
In
that's a
fact, what
feels
she
bad
did,
moment.
which was very smart, was even with Shopify, she actually reached out to their customer service and said, "I'm on Shark Tank. Our episode is airing this, whatever it was." She did this like a week in advance, and she wanted to make sure that she basically enlisted their support, and they then assured her that there were things they can do specifically, knowing that this was expected to support the extra bandwidth to make sure that the site wasn't going to crash, because that's your biggest fear when you're on. I mean, like you said, you've made it, you're on Shark Tank. That's like the ultimate, even if you
Yep.
don't get a deal, it's going to drive a ton of sales. And so the worst thing that could happen in that moment is your site goes down because it can't handle the load.
Yeah, that sucks. So yeah, just all these things to be aware of. Utilize all the technology that you have. I did want to or I wanted to kind of put up one poll before we get to the Q&A here and wrap things up. Um, I wanted to know if you guys would like to see us cover any specific channel. I made this a multiple choice, and I only included some of the top ones right now. I see TikTok Shop immediately got selected, so cool, good to know.
Great. Now
Yeah,
I
I
have to
mean,
actually go onto TikTok.
I know. Being in the marketing team here at WebGility, I've always been sort of I fly under the radar. I don't have a lot of social media activity, but being in marketing, I have to be active on TikTok and Instagram and stuff. So I had to install TikTok on my phone, and I felt like I'd let myself down really bad.
I like what Alex said in the chat. That's what I said too, but I got to do it. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
exactly.
I when TikTok started clearly getting popular, I basically squatted my brand on the platform. I haven't put up a single video, and it's funny. I get notifications now and then that somebody's followed me on TikTok, and I'm like, "Why? I've given you zero reasons to follow me on TikTok." But
Yeah, I had to. I've never been the type of person to do, you know, social media videos. But I find myself doing vertical videos where I'm like making scenarios, and it feels really jarring to me, but I'm getting used to it. It just takes a little bit of an adjustment. So
yeah,
Magento 2, I see that. Awesome. Yeah, I know we integrate with Magento 2, and I mean I guess now it's called Adobe Commerce. But
Hmm.
the reason I asked this poll, and I'll end it here in a second, and I know there's a couple people who haven't answered yet, but the reason I put this up is we're trying to obviously have more in-depth conversations, things that are valuable to you guys, and it's very obvious that starting new channels and kind of getting into the groove with these new channels is important to you guys. You want to know the best way to go about it and the best way to maybe start a TikTok shop and run a TikTok shop. Um, and that's what we want to do. So this helps us understand where you guys want our efforts to lie. It's it's actually funny though because it's pretty evenly split amongst all of these. So Amazon, Shopify, TikTok Shop, they're all pretty even in terms of interest from this poll specifically. So I think we already had some plans to do stuff with Amazon, Shopify, and TikTok Shop specifically. So it's good to know that we're on the right track there.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm just noticing as I'm looking at the list, John, that you have Poshmark on here. I'd never heard of Poshmark, but I ended up on the site because I was searching for something very specific that I found and bought on the site. But something we talked about earlier in terms of understanding these sales channels and like who they cater to specifically, like who are the people who are selling on those platforms, because that might give you an idea knowing where you are in that world, whether or not you belong on there. So I learned actually that Poshmark is specifically for people who are basically selling their used stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I came to understand. So I'm no, people who know me know I'm like I'm kind of a little crazy with my Muppets. You can probably recognize I've got the count here to my right. But long story short, I got a harebrained idea one day that I needed to have like a plush toy version of Hamburglar. It was kind of like a joke that came up between me and my wife, and I found one on Poshmark, and here he is.
I love it.
I
That's
love
great.
it.
Yeah, I hope this list is helpful to some of you. I know obviously like the top 10 are very known. They're well known in the industry. It'd be kind of embarrassing if you didn't know what Amazon was at this point. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a centralized resource for if you wanted to get started or understand what it takes to get started in these channels. Then you at least have a place to start with. So again, that'll be listed at the end of the webinar here. I guess we can just get started with the Q&A. I know you guys have been asking questions as we go, so we might not have a lot left over. But now, if you have any questions, even not related to this topic, I guess we're happy to answer them. Fire away.
Yeah, bring it. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, what was I going to say? Well, in any case, I totally lost my train of thought. I had something right at the tip of my mind that I wanted to share.
It'll come back to you.
It'll definitely come back probably as soon as we end the webinar. But yeah, so any questions along any of the lines of what we've talked about, or even related, or even not so related, if you think one of us might have the experience, you're welcome to it. By the way, I love how we have everybody's, including myself, everybody's virtual assistants in the chat
It's a
taking
sign of the
notes.
times.
It'd be interesting to see, like I have my Otter assistant and Mary's got hers. It would be interesting to compare them side by side to see, because it's the same product, to see if it gets the exact same results for, for both of us, or if there's differences. Um,
Yeah, that's always the interesting thing with AI is
yeah.
the
Oh, here's what I
nuances.
wanted to mention. Um, Earlier I talked about how I used Notion AI, which is basically Chat GPT just inside of Notion, to build out a marketing plan. It was really for accountants who want to serve e-commerce business owners and how they might go about creating a marketing plan for them. I'm happy to share the link to that sort of plan that I had it come up with. So John, I'll get you that and you can share that with everyone. Even if you're a merchant and not an accountant looking to serve the merchants, I guarantee you there's a lot of information in what we came up with that will be useful to you. You might just have to, sort of pivot in terms of your thinking around this.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, definitely. Okay, couple questions. First, Martha Nunez, do you integrate with Target Plus? As of right now, we do not integrate with Target Plus. However, there are a couple options for you there. You can we have a team development team that actually focuses specifically on customizations. So you can kind of put in a request for us to develop that specifically for you. That is a paid option, but it is an option nonetheless. If you use Webgility either with QuickBooks Desktop or online, you actually can do manual order pulling as well. So you just download your orders as a spreadsheet and then feed them into HubSpot and we'll or into Webgility, and then we'll put it into QuickBooks for you. Um, so a couple options there. There are also integrations out there that aren't Webgility that do integrate with Target Plus. So you have a lot of options available to you. Bobby, you asked, does Webgility connect with QuickBooks Desktop? We absolutely do. That has been sort of our bread and butter for the past almost 2 decades. So yes, QuickBooks Desktop is an option. If you go onto our pricing page, there is a whole list of features that are available for the QuickBooks Desktop integration. If creating an ebook or info series, how do the channels work? So as far as Amazon or Audible goes, in my experience, it's very similar to if you're just listing a product there. There are specific, you're like a specific type of seller at that point, though. Audible being a good example of this is
Yeah, there's
their
an area
mate.
of Amazon specifically for digital products, I
Yeah.
believe. And then
Yeah.
Audible,
So
obviously, if you have an ebook, I assume that means you would also have the audio version where you're reading the ebook to people and you can list that on Audible.
yeah, I will send you, I have an article here for selling on Audible that I can send you.
Yeah, and then in terms of selling that kind of stuff on, any other sort of shopping cart platform, generally the way that's going to work is you're going to create a product in whatever way you need to, and then you're going to set up some kind of an email autoresponder. So when they purchase that digital product, the site responds with a link to download,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah, it's generally pretty straightforward. Actually, probably more straightforward than selling a physical good because of the lack of inventory management and distribution and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check out that link I sent you. It should work very similarly to Amazon. It's just going to be sort of a different setup entirely for
Yeah.
like how you're presented on Amazon. Bob, you had another question. Are there people that can be hired to set up Webgility and QuickBooks? So while Webgility does have an onboarding team and onboarding is included whenever you purchase a plan with Webgility, we generally don't set up QuickBooks for you. I think Seth, you don't do that anymore, right?
I don't, but I have access to a large community of accountants and bookkeepers, and within that, I definitely have people who can help support you. So, y'all have John's email. Just reach out to him. Let him know you'd like to get in touch with me. This just keeps it simple, and then John will get you in touch with me so I can help you with anything like that. I can definitely, yeah. I'll say this: the onboarding for WebGility is amazing. You will have a dedicated person who will get back to you and log in remotely with you via Zoom, have you share your screen, and set up everything beautifully. But like John said, they won't set up QuickBooks because that's not their area per se. So I can definitely get you help with the QuickBooks part.
Yeah.
And you'll find out you kind of need the QuickBooks part done first so that WebGility can hook into the right places in QuickBooks to get all the workflow set up.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, just send me an email and I can get you set up with all the information that you need and we'll take care of you.
Yep. And some people are saying thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you all participating and showing up today, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed the session.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. Again, I'll just show the slide here. This is going to be sent out to you guys. Just to quickly call it out. First resource on the left is an article from HubSpot that talks about finding your audience if you don't know where it's at currently and ways that you can engage with your audience or understand where they're at. That middle box is for that list that I just showed with the 50 sales channels. And then there will be a link to register for the next webinar, which again is talking about omni-channel, kind of goes beyond just having different sales channels. It expands into all those other technologies and nuances that kind of affect the business and help you grow. Yes, thank you again, everybody, for coming. We're trying to get in the habit, and we have stuck with this habit of doing it every 2 weeks. So after this next webinar on the 15th, there should probably be another one 15 days later. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me, john.may@webgility.com. Look out for the recording and the slideshow. Probably early tomorrow, it'll be sent out via email. Thanks, Seth. Always appreciate you. It was always good
Always
talking
a
to you.
pleasure, John. Thank you.
Take it easy, everybody.